Hey guys, so welcome back to all of our travel lovers, thrill seekers, and fellow adventurers. This is an episode of Suitcase Divas where we typically talk about, hidden gems and all inclusives and all the amazing places that you could possibly stay. But what happens if your vacay turns into a slaycay? Well, this today's guest knows all about the dark side of travel's gone wrong. And it when I say gone wrong, like either you're lost at sea or you killed at an all-inclusive, anything, either way, it doesn't end well. It's not going to be your ideal travel situation. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. So we are thrilled and maybe a little nervous because of these stories to welcome Kim, one of the three co-hosts of Slaycation podcast.
Mhm.
The show dives into the chilling true crime stories of vacations gone horribly wrong.
Very wrong.
I'm super excited about this because I love true crime podcasts. That's kind of
Yeah.
how part of how I got into listening to podcasts, and I used to read the true crime books. So it was really interesting to hear this side of it. I do want to give a disclaimer / warning that this
Yes.
episode, we do talk about death, we talk about murder, we do some descriptive talking about like what happens to some of the victims. So if this
Yeah.
isn't your cup of tea, this might be the Suitcase Divas episode you skip. But we are very excited to
Very excited.
introduce you guys to Kim from Slaycation.
Yay, awesome. So let's welcome Kim from Slaycation podcast.
Hi,
Hi, Kim.
Welcome, Kim.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before Slaycation, you were a true crime listener and you did a lot of knitting and kind of binge listening to true crimes. What inspired you to actually go ahead and start a podcast about that?
Well, it's interesting because I never thought that I would be doing that. It just so happened that my husband had an idea for a show, and he was thinking about Slaycation as a TV show because his company develops TV shows and podcasts now. And he happened to mention it to me, and I just kind of rattled off a couple of cases that I just have heard through my years of just consuming this
Yeah.
Mhm.
content. It was kind of always my thing. Like, I am the OG of true crime. Like, I been doing it before DNA. Oh, like,
It's a thing.
right. Like, my husband met me when we first met and we started dating. He always tells the story of when he had first come to my house and my bookshelf was just all true crime nonfiction.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was like that person that just read a lot, but that was the, you know, material that I read. And yeah, it was like I was reading about the Green River Killer before DNA identified who he was.
Maybe you were a detective in your past life.
I must have been because I always joke how I missed my calling
Yeah.
Mhm.
because, I'm like, oh my God, there were so many things I could have done. What was I thinking? But yeah, so I really, that's where it started. And then when my husband and his business partner, who both of them are my co-hosts, took the leap into podcasting, we decided, you know what, we can do a true crime podcast. And we began, and thus the birth of Slaycation, which
Mhm.
is a podcast on murders, mysterious deaths, and disappearances while away on
Mhm.
vacation. We're out
Mhm.
of
What a
town.
great name and a great concept. Like you grabbed those two markets and just that's awesome.
Yes, yes. And yeah, my husband, yeah, Adam, he is the brains behind the operation. That, yeah. So, and it's surprising to think that there's actually that much that could fit into such a niche,
Mhm.
But yep, there is.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. Well, and so like you said, Adam's your husband, he kind of came with it. And then Jerry, so was Jerry and Adam kind of like a package deal working together? And then you guys all came up with the whole podcast? How do you guys know Jerry?
Well, Jerry is actually my husband's business partner and
Okay.
longtime friend. Like we've been friends forever.
Yeah.
Adam and Jerry met in college.
Okay. Because you can tell there's a history there. You
Yes.
guys can tell that you guys are besties.
Great
and,
vibe.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like I love Jerry. I love his husband. I love them. We go way back. You figure me and my husband have been together now almost 31 years. And I've known wow, yeah, I've known Jerry almost as
You're like, wait, we're not that old.
Exactly.
Where does the time go?
Don't even get me started. I'm like, I used to always joke, like I remembered when I started getting older, like my mother would start lying about my age.
Yes. I know what that's like. My oldest is 27 and
Oh, girl,
it's yeah. So when
Yeah.
I say that, well, I don't know what I'm going to do when she gets to 30. I don't know how I'm going to handle that, but
Oh my God. No,
I might just be like, I have girls in their 20s. That might be
right.
my
Exactly.
answer.
Exactly.
Go with the younger one.
Exactly.
Right? That
Yes.
makes sense. That's a great plan, Sean.
So before Slaycation, how did your background as a social worker in domestic violence shape the way you approached telling true crime stories?
Well, the thing about even my work in that field, having worked with, I've worked with women who were dealing with addictions and homelessness, and women who were dealing with domestic violence situations. Now, one of the things about me, and I guess and I find that it just overlaps in kind of the podcasting and the work that I've done is that I have always been a student of people. Like I find people fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
People fascinate me. I
Yeah.
I just find people interesting. And and that's how it lends itself, like even my work now as a podcaster is sort of looking at all the players and just trying to while telling the story, kind of come to it with sort of an understanding of some sorts as best as I could, like where and how did we get here? How did we get
Mm-hmm.
here? How did we get here? Like the first case that we did was the Henthorne case. It was Tony Henthorne, her husband, why am I forgetting his name? But Harold. And they got together and, it was the second marriage for each of them. And, they married and had a daughter. And he ended up killing her.
Mm-hmm.
And, while I was looking at that case, I was just really struck by how vulnerable she was, and vulnerable by way of just so desperately wanting to keep this marriage together, to keep their family intact, that she
didn't see the red flags.
girl, I mean, those red flags, man, they were like there were just so many red flags. And,
Right.
but by the time that she started to realize that she was in danger, it was too late. I mean, there were just so many
Right.
things with him, like
Yeah.
controlling the money, like that, she was the primary wage earner. And not that you can't have, families have different ways of working out their finances and, but I take that. I understand. Look, maybe it's just me, but I understand marriage is a partnership, and
Mm-hmm.
you make decisions together. This idea to me that someone's in charge is kind of fucking crazy because
Yeah.
it's
Right.
just not. It's just not.
We get it.
Yeah. And but he was in charge of the finances. He dictated how the money was spent. She had a lucrative practice in Louisiana, but and she was, I would presume, happy, settled there, raising her daughter there. Her family was nearby. I mean, all the things that we would want, like our families are nearby, da 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 da. What does he do? He decides that they need to move. So he uproots his family.
Yeah, they isolate.
Yeah, exactly. Moves them to Colorado. Yeah.
She doesn't know. She was blind.
Right. No, exactly. And it was just like one of those things too, where it's like, he would, like he had it so that when her phone would ring or she got messages on her phone, they would come to his phone as well. That's fucking weird.
That's absolutely
That's fucking
Yeah.
just weird.
Yeah, it is.
What the hell?
Right.
It's like, that's what I did to my 13-year-old. Okay.
Right, exactly. But there's a reason to parent at that point. Like, she's a grown adult. That's just
Thank you.
controlling. So,
Exactly.
Exactly. But so I know Slaycation is a mix of like mystery and humor. So how do you kind of find the balance between that while respecting the gravity of what the situation is? Like, I like that you guys have a balance of like, you can throw some humor in there, but it also is, somebody's dying.
Right.
So it's kind of like you gotta tiptoe
And you
one way or
guys do
the other.
balance that really well because
Oh,
it's the
thank you.
dynamic. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's the thing is that these are hard stories. And I'm always very aware that these are hard stories that have resulted in the worst day and time in people's lives.
Right.
And
Yeah.
situations that have occurred that have literally ruined people's lives. So that is never lost on me. And,
Right.
we try to keep the humor respectful, but just it really is to just to bring levity to
Right.
the situation so that the story can be told. And given that I'm not a journalist, so I'm not coming at it in that respect, the storytelling really is a way to center the victim in the story.
Right.
Right.
And to tell their story. And also to, in a way, try to pay homage in a sense, because I believe that there is something to be learned from every story. We can learn something from it. And I think that that's a sort of a kind way to sort of pay in what I feel is our way of paying tribute to those that have gone before us, that have experienced heinous deaths. And to just say, what is our takeaway? What can we do? How does this protect all of us? How can we, learn from this?
Right. And one of the episodes, I guess it was the one, I've listened to so many, but it was the one about the 14-year-old boy in Aruba that went out jet skiing, and they never found his body. You clearly said there's not enough being done. Like, there wasn't enough done. They never recovered the body, but it's obvious that father and son duo, like, whatever they did, they killed him. Like, there's no question in my mind. But so I thought it was cool that you actually are trying to advocate for the case to be like, follow up, actually do the research, hold them accountable, because if you look at their background, they're trash, they're rubbish. Like, they clearly did it, and they're never held to accountability, and that's bullshit. So I love that you guys are saying that's bullshit, and we're trying to get something done here, because there's still a possibility they could be held accountable if they would actually do the due diligence,
Right. And just the missed opportunities, like, let's circle back, let's ask these questions, let's see if anybody saw something, let's see if anybody heard something. That case was that case was so upsetting, and it was and that's the thing. Shoddy police work makes me crazy because I'm like,
Mhm.
why do I know what to do?
Right.
Like, like, why were these men not taken, separated, and questioned?
Mhm. Right.
You
And I
know?
like that you guys, that's one of the things when you were talking about just a minute ago, how you bring the victim to the center of the story. And as you guys are telling, and you're telling the story from that perspective, the questions that pop up are usually things that we would ask ourselves that when we're hearing it from on the news or from a direct source or, they're not asking those questions. And sometimes when we ask ourselves those questions, like, how did they not see the red flag or how did they not? Those are valid questions that we don't always feel comfortable asking because it can make us look like, well, we're judging, and we're not.
Right,
It's more
right.
of, okay, can we be better aware? Because if this is a smart person, or this is a young,
Right.
like they're in a situation that they don't necessarily realize they're in. How many of those situations have we been in? So by you guys asking
Right.
each other these questions, it's also making the listener say, okay, this is valid. I need to make sure it just brings up a little bit, a different form of awareness. I
Exactly. I
think.
mean, and that's the thing, because it's never with the intent of judging or
Right.
blaming, but it
Mm-hmm.
sense to kind of deconstruct. And because I'm sure that all of them would say, this is what I would do different if I had the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to come back and have a do-over.
Mm-hmm.
No
Right.
doubt in my mind. So I don't feel that we're, you know, I don't feel like it's, to your point, like it's not judging. It's
Right.
just it's learning,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
you know.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So you have told quite a few stories. Are there some that stand out more fascinating or bizarre than others? Like just stick in your head? What can you tell us? One or two of those?
Yes, I will tell you this one. And whenever I get asked this question, this story still remains the most what the fuck went on here. Like what? So this is the story of I don't know if you guys heard this, but this was the story of Joel and let's see, Joel Jr., Joel Guy Jr. He was the son of Lisa and Joel Guy Sr. And he came home to spend Thanksgiving with his family, his parents, and his sisters came over. His sisters were um, from his father's first marriage, but
Mm-hmm.
so what ended up happening was he ended up killing his parents.
Mm.
Now, what made this bizarre was that he not only just murdered them, he decapitated them, he dismembered their bodies. His
Oh,
mom's head was boiling in a pot downstairs, like really fucking crazy.
I missed this episode. I haven't gotten to it yet,
Girl,
maybe.
you gotta listen to it. It was
Hot
just
damn.
Wow.
the thing that blew me away about this case is usually when I am researching these cases and sort of just consuming everything that I can.
Mm-hmm.
It's always something that comes up that you're like, yeah, that's weird. Yeah, that can speak to, how one's psyche can become so warped, whether it's a history of abuse or, not to say that abuse equals, being a killer,
Right.
but you can always kind of look back,
Yeah.
say neglect, there was neglect. Oh,
Like the Menendez brothers or
right.
whatever. They were abused their whole
Ex-
childhood. So you kind of like, well, you know what?
exactly.
They snapped. You can only take so
Right.
much, and they
Right.
snapped.
Right. It's sort of like that, question that has become kind of like the universal battle cry. Make it make sense. So we're always
Mm-hmm.
in the quest of trying to do that. And this was the case. This was the only case that I was not able to do that because you have this guy who is just adored, like adored by his family. Every account describes his childhood being filled with love and care, and his parents, especially his mom, doted on him. I mean, he wanted for nothing.
Mhm.
He went off to school. His parents paid his college tuition. They paid for his apartment. They paid for his car. They paid for the insurance on the car. So you know, he didn't have anything that would make you go,
Right. Like it wasn't like he was physically abused his whole life or
oh,
mentally abused.
no.
Hmm.
But yet he has his mom's head in a pot downstairs. Like, what the fuck was that? Like,
Yeah.
Now, did the sisters walk in to find the parents killed? I guess we'll have to go back to that episode.
Yeah.
Now I want to
I
listen
know.
to that.
I don't. Was this an earlier episode, or because I'm going from the bottom to the top, so I haven't
Right,
heard all of them.
it was, I guess you could say it was like probably like since it was Thanksgiving, it was like in that. So it was like a November.
Okay, around that time. Okay,
Right.
I'm writing it down.
Yes. And, but that was the thing. It was, a very loving family. One of the things that I talk about in this family that was really sort of like, when he was facing the court and his
Mhm.
sister would come up to speak, it was just heart-wrenching because they were bereft and they had no idea. Like, and one of the things that they talked about, one of them in particular, was he was loved. Like he
Mhm.
loved,
Mhm.
and they spoke about like one of them was talking about her stepmother because this was her only biological child, and to think that her biological child
Right.
was
That's
the one
wild.
that took her out. Like one of the sisters spoke to that, like how she just ached to think of her stepmother in that moment, in the realization that her only biological child was doing this to her.
Right.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Well, are there any unsolved cases that really make you be like, what the fuck happened there? Like, well, for the first one, that one out in Aruba, that for me was like crazy. But for you, like, is there any other cases or that you're
Unsolved
like,
that keep you up at night, kind of like.
yeah,
there's a couple. That case, the Max case, McGreevy case,
yes,
that's haunting. And that is haunting for the reason that he literally was there and then he wasn't. And
Mhm.
that his poor mother, having already experienced the loss
Lost
of
the
her
husband.
husband,
Mhm.
her children are traumatized, she's traumatized, you know, they're just trying to get it together and they just try to go away to just reconnect as a family. And she had initially had told her son that she didn't want him to go jet
No,
skiing.
yeah, he couldn't go jet
Right,
skiing
because
with
he'd
the dad.
already done it, and
Mhm.
she was like, "No." And he wore her down, and let's face it, we know when kids want something,
Yes.
oh my God, they
The guilt she must live with to be like, I gave
exactly,
in, I caved. I can't believe he would still be here if I was more firm and I had said no.
exactly.
The guilt she lives with, that pain, that is
Right.
heartbreaking.
Mm.
Like I wish if there was anything I could do, I could take that guilt away from her and just
Yeah.
discard it somewhere. Because
Mhm.
and just the horror of thinking that like she has no idea what happened. She wasn't there.
Well, and they were
Yes,
targeted. Those
no
guys
doubt.
absolutely targeted that family
Yeah.
and took advantage of their situation.
Yes, exactly.
It's so sad. That to me, that one is like, oh my God,
Right?
I feel so
And a
bad for the
lot of
mom.
these episodes bring up a lot of emotions, the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the what would I do? Like, what if that were me? How would I handle that? What if that were
Right.
my family member? How do you balance that emotion for yourself, like as you're doing this and keeping from getting overwhelmed or bogged down by those emotions?
Wow. So, what an incredible conversation so far. Kim has taken us down the road through a lot of chilling and gory true crime stories thus far. The one that stands out the most for me is the Aruba trip. And the family had already been going through a rough time. And then she chose to didn't trust her gut kind of moment. So that one was really, really hard for me and very emotional. And so I wonder, when Kim is going through these stories and all of that, the weight of what is happening to these victims kind of has to weigh on you. I just wonder if it ever takes its toll emotionally. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. I've always wondered that when I've read the, nonfiction, true crime, and then when podcasts came out, how the storytellers handle and navigate the
Yeah,
emotional part of it. So
it's very deep.
next week in our two-part series with Kim from Slaycation, we'll dive deep into how she navigates the heavier side of crime storytelling.
Yeah.
And you won't want to miss it. So be sure to hit the follow button and make sure you are also checking out Slaycation. If you want to hear any of the episodes that we discussed today from Slaycation, the first one we talked about, or one of the ones we talked about, was episode 1 for Slaycation, was Rocky Mountain Murder or Accident with a question mark. So
Yeah,
check that one
was
out.
dark. Yep.
The one Denise was talking about, the Aruba one, is episode 45, Last Call at the Aruban Sandbar. And then I thought this one was the most interesting, and I'm actually listening to it now. Episode 48, Home for the Holoslays.
And
That
that is
was
bananas.
Yes. So make sure you're also checking out the episodes from Slaycation. Follow them, follow us, and then come back next week and check out the conclusion.
Stay tuned.
Yes, with Kim from Slaycation.
Mm-hmm.